Ange,
Yes.
so if we got into a fight, and then after the fight got broken up and we were skating away, if I gave you the finger, then got fined for that, and then the fans of my beautiful team started to raise money for that fine to pay it for me, who's the last person that you would want contributing to that pool?
Oh, that's a tough one, but I think I know where you're going with this. Is the answer ex-wife?
Yeah, I'd have to say that's got to be pretty high up there on the list of people who nobody would want to be supporting a cause like that, especially when you're in the middle of some legal disputes. But any of our listeners likely know where we're heading with this. One of the funniest things that happened this past week in the NHL, where Ryan Hartman and Evander Kane got into a fight, and Ryan Hartman gave Kane the finger as they were skating away from each other. What were your first thoughts when you saw the highlights of this incident?
I thought it was hilarious because Ryan Hartman and Evander Kane have had a lot of problems in the past. This isn't their first altercation. I think in 2019, Hartman was given like a major and ejected from the game for a fight with Evander Kane. So there was some stuff brewing here.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think the way that it started is it's pretty ironic because we talked about this in the last episode. Surprise, surprise. The Wild are up 5-1, crushing Edmonton midway through the second period. And it all starts off with Matt Zuccarello taking exception to a hit from Kyler Yamamoto. Kirill Kaprizov comes in, try to protect his man, and then the entire Wild team realizes that Kirill Kaprizov scores all of their goals.
Yeah,
five people go and attack Evander Kane.
The whole line was there.
Yeah, and it led to a huge fight. I thought the funniest thing when I was reacting to this is Hartman's comment, and I'm going to read it verbatim because I thought it was hilarious. He said, "We don't want Kaprizov in there. He, as in Evander Kane, gave Kirill a shot from behind in a very vulnerable spot. It goes to show we had 5 guys in there. They didn't have one guy to help Kane. I don't think any of those guys want to defend him."
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a shot.
It was a shot. I think he realized he was going to get fined, so he just went all for it.
Might as well.
Yeah.
That's not even a shot at Kane. That's also a shot at the Oilers.
A huge shot.
How maybe they're not together through all of this, which is important.
Yeah, we talked about this when Evander Kane got signed, and we asked whether it would affect the locker room and the culture in there. And we've also talked about McDavid and his ability to cultivate a strong dressing room. These are all things that we've mentioned a bunch. So I don't think it's a surprise that one of the most broken dressing rooms in the league is the Edmonton Oilers, because on paper that team is stacked, and there's a reason it's not translating.
Well, I mean, give them credit. They're second in the Pacific, and we're not. At least I don't follow them close enough to know if there's a broken dressing room or not. But I think we'll find out after a game like this or after a comment like that, depending on how they bounce back or, for that matter, don't bounce back or show their resolve in the next game, will be interesting. That may be something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Yeah, just to kind of hate on the Pacific a little bit. I think like 4 teams are within 2 points of second place. So I'm not going to give Edmonton too much credit, but we'll talk about this pretty soon, is that since the Woodcroft era began, they have made some jumps. So we'll give them credit there.
There's definitely been a lot of improvement, but we're talking about Kane. Why don't we stick on him? And
sure,
we talked about this funny incident, but I think now's a good time to reflect a little bit on how that signing has worked out for them. So he's played about 35 games. He has 16 goals and 29 points over an 82 game season. That's 37 and a half goals, which, hey, I mean, you're almost a 40 goal scorer at that pace. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what they were looking for. But how would you summarize or reflect on how Kane has been for the Oilers?
I think he's been everything that they expected from him when they signed. Yeah. When you signed Evander Kane coming off that really good season he had in San Jose the year before, you knew what you were getting. You were getting a prolific offensive scorer who doesn't play defense very well. Yeah. And when we look at it this year, he's in the 79th percentile of expected value of offense and then the 19th percentile of defense. So like I said, they needed second line scoring depth. They went out and got a guy that they thought would do that, and man, he's given it to them. The only problem that I will say is that because he plays with McDavid, that line is really bad defensively.
Yeah.
And they play, 25, 27 minutes a night? I mean...
Well, depends. I'm sure McDavid plays a touch more than all those guys, but they're on the ice a lot.
Yeah, a lot. All these advanced stats show that the McDavid line before Evander Kane with Hyman on that line was, I think, 90th in the league in expected goals per 60 minutes, which is not good as a line. And now when you have add Evander Kane to that line,
90th in the league.
Yes.
Oh shoot.
They are the 90th best line in the league.
Oh, I thought for a second I thought you said 90th percentile. I was like, what the heck?
No, 90th best. And then you add Evander Kane, who's objectively a worse defender than Zach Hyman, and things get a lot worse.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize that was the case. But I think another thing I hate using this stat, so I'm kicking myself for even bringing it up. But he has 52 penalty minutes in 35 games. I'm sure a few of those are fights. And again, I'm going to acknowledge this is a useless stat in terms of really what value you bring on the ice. But I think a lot of the commentary about the Oilers, that they needed a little bit more bite. They needed some more toughness. They needed a few more guys who were going to be pricks. And that's what Kane is. That's why guys like Ryan Hartman hate him, because he is a prick. Mm-hmm. So you're getting some scoring. You're getting some of that bite that does have value in the playoffs. Let's not kid ourselves. So I think on those two fronts, it's actually been pretty helpful for them.
Yeah, it's like we talked about last episode that maybe guys like Landeskog and Wilson, and we'll add Kane to this list now.
He's in that list.
Maybe they get paid because they not only bring that protection or prevention level, they're also able to score you 40 a year. Like I can count on my left hand how many forwards are able to be that gritty and also score you 40.
Yeah, it's not many.
Right? And when we look at it even more, I think Evander Kane was a huge add to their power play. It's kind of ironic to think about with Draisaitl and with McDavid that power play is not as good as it was supposed to be. And I'll give Tippett credit. When the year started off, they started at 17-5. The power play was very, very good. But when they got into that slide, that power play was then very, very bad. It was bad. And now I think they're standing at about 26%, which is about fourth best in the league behind Toronto, St. Louis, and Colorado, like some pretty offensively good teams. And you got to wonder if a lot of that is because Evander Kane is on that first power play now.
Possibly. I mean, even if having one good unit is important, but even if he flip-flops between the first, if he stays on the first and he bumps a guy down to the second, and if he's on the second for whatever reason, that gives them that balance. He's done a lot of good for them. Special teams is important, especially for that team where they're loaded and they're going to draw a lot of penalties. McDavid leads the league in drawing penalties, so having a good power play you can lean on is huge. Yeah,
you even talked about this earlier when we talked about teams that we think will be good in the playoffs. Always the ones are the teams that are good on special teams, and he adds a very, very important role. I think he plays the bumper role on their first line power play. And we know that Connor McDavid's the best playmaker in the league. I've watched a lot of their games after the Leafs play, and it's always that same move. They bring it up to Nurse, over to McDavid. They slide it across, and Kane just puts it in.
He's gonna find you.
He knows how to finish.
If you're on McDavid's line, he's gonna find you. And before we get flamed, when I say that specialty, and this is true, the whistles get put in the pockets a little bit in the playoffs, mm-hmm. but I think there's stats out there that show that the number of power plays stay the same or go up slightly. It's just there are so many more penalties that go uncalled in the playoffs. So having a good power play, and for that matter, a good penalty kill, is still vital for any type of success in the playoffs.
Very true. So we're talking a big game about Evander Kane. My question to you is that has he earned a big contract in this offseason?
I would be hesitant to sign him to a long-term deal, just because we've seen that things tend to go sour if he stays at a place for too long. It happened in Winnipeg. It happened in Buffalo. It happened in San Jose, where he was welcomed with open arms, and then guys went to pick him up at the airport. They were so excited to have him, and then fast forward 2 or 3 years, they want him out. Mm-hmm. They were begging for him to be kicked out last offseason before this one started and before all the things happened. They were begging for him to be kicked out, and Doug Wilson didn't until he did. So I would be really hesitant to give him that long-term deal, but he's gonna get signed somewhere, and if he's been a good fit in Edmonton and they like him there, I would probably try and keep him if I were the GM there. What about you?
I think the sweet spot is about 4 to 5 million in AAV, and if you can get him on a 2-3 year deal, that is perfect. Yeah. We talk about this a lot. Just looking at his statistics, he should be signing a 9x8 contract. He is unbelievable offensively, but there is a reason, like you said, why he cannot last a full 10 year with a certain team. There's problems in the locker room. So like we mentioned earlier when we were discussing the Kane signing, it was such a good move on the fact of the Oilers GM, because you not only got a great scorer for that second line depth, but you do it on a term short enough where these problems don't come to light. Right, we always see that Evander Kane, the problems always come to like 3 or 4 years into the contract because he gets comfortable, he starts to speak a little bit more freely, right? So if you can sign him on a 2-year deal, maybe you're able to get those good years from him and not have to face the consequences.
And also, he's 30 now.
Yeah,
he's feels like this guy who's always been in his mid-20s for his whole career, but he is 30. So if you're signing him to a 5-year deal, that's up when he's 35. So that's something also to be wary about. Not even the fact that he tends to cause problems at some point, or the problems tend to follow him around, but he's also a little bit older than maybe most people would expect, at least older than I thought he was when he signed that contract. So and if I said you can sign him at 4 years at Zach Hyman money, which is 5.5, would you do that?
On the Leafs?
No, for Edmonton. If you're Edmonton,
100% they take
5.5. You would do that?
Yeah, 5.5 for 4 years. I think you want to stay away from a 6+ year deal with Evander Kane.
And I don't know how much leverage he has either, Evander Kane. He's lucky that they took a chance on him. I mean, this is the NHL where people have short memories. If you play good, you're gonna get signed. Play well, rather, you're gonna get signed. So he's going to make his money. I think for Edmonton's sake, they would like to keep him there. But I was looking through their cap-friendly page. They have 3 RFAs to sign too. Ryan McLeod, who, plays in their bottom 6. But Yamamoto and Puljujarvi are both up this offseason.
Who've been very good this year.
They've been very good. I don't know where they're going to find all the money to keep them with some pretty big contracts. Maybe they have to package those and give them away. But if you were the Oilers, if you're Ken Holland, are you prioritizing keeping these younger players, or would you prioritize keeping Kane instead of them?
I would say keeping Kane just because he's been so good with McDavid and because we know how that line plays so much for the Oilers. I mean, if you have one good line that plays 25 minutes a night, they can do a lot of damage, especially in the playoffs. But what I will say is I think there's an opportunity where they can do both. And I think the answer is giving up some draft picks to offload those terrible goalie contracts.
Not even Koskinen, but Cassian makes, I think, 3. Keith, they can't trade away that contract. They just bought him. They just got him. Barry makes, I think, 4.5. CC makes 3.
Cody CC.
It's just a lot. That's a lot of money you don't need to be paying these guys. The Zach Cassian signing was terrible the moment he signed it, I thought, because he had a good year. He scored 20 goals. Okay, great, but he was never going to do that. And he was playing with McDavid when it happened. I don't know.
I'll give my legendary line. I could score 20 goals if I was beside Connor McDavid.
Honestly, you could. You could, because we've seen it when Cassian got taken off that line. He's been a non-factor for them pretty much. And I know he's good for the locker room. He does those things. But at some point, you need to provide value besides that if you're going to be making $3+ million. I was actually reading an article, and the whole sort of main point of that article was that if they had to choose between Puljujarvi and Kane, the writer of this article said that they should keep Puljujarvi.
Really? Okay, why?
And they said that, one, because he's an RFA, so you have control, he's younger, all of those sort of demographic variables, let's call them. But when they dove into the analytics, they said that Puljujarvi has been more effective on McDavid's wing than Kane has, which I found surprising. But according to the numbers, he has a better goal share than Kane on McDavid's wing, and he also has a better expected goals. So seems to be that he's driving the play a little bit better. Granted, Kane's only been there half a year, but I just thought it was interesting that and both of us, rightfully so, I guess, thought that Kane, and he is doing well, but that he was the best winger that McDavid has, but some of these numbers suggest it might not be the case. So they're going to have a tough decision to make. Yeah,
I think when it comes down to the end of the day, you could put a bag of pucks beside Connor McDavid and he'll look good, but it would help having a 40-goal scorer there, and I think that Ken Holland will overpay for Evander Kane just because the signing is making him look really good right now.
It is.
Yeah. You know what another signing that is making him look good right now that we can talk about a little bit?
Who's that?
Jay Woodcroft.
Okay.
You know, correct me if I'm incorrect, but the Kane and Woodcroft signings happened around the same time, right?
They were close enough, yeah.
Right? So when we see this resurgence that the Edmonton Oilers have had since the Tippett era ended and the Kane era began, I start to wonder whether the team is doing better, the power play is doing better, McDavid is doing better, if that's even possible, because he's insane right now. If that is because of the additions they made on the wing with Kane, or if it was Jay Woodcroft. And I saw this crazy graphic on Twitter that I wanted to talk about by Evolving Hockey, and it shows that in legitimately every offensive, defensive stat that is being recorded right now, the Edmonton Oilers are leaps and bounds better under Jay Woodcroft. We're looking at things in goals for per 60 minutes, expected goals for per 60 minutes, shooting percentage, goals against per 60 minutes. The list goes on and on and on. Jay Woodcroft has had an immeasurable effect on this team, and thank God, from an NHL fan perspective, at the perfect time, because this is a historic franchise that was at the bottom of the barrel at that time. They needed to make a turnaround. I'm really happy they did. I really hope we see them in the playoffs, because it would be a really cool second round matchup to see Oilers versus Minnesota after what we saw with Ryan Hartman.
Well, if it's Minnesota, that would be amazing. But also, it could be Battle of Alberta in the second round or third round too.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool matchups.